You can have you.
Main event of the evening.
Ready to race to you.
These days are
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today we are discussing Season 10, Episode 20, Babysitting.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Babysitting.
Ashley is going away for a weekend-long tax seminar.
Oh, I think I'm ready to go. Do I look all right?
Mommy, you look beautiful.
You look better than beautiful. Your face should be on money.
And in the meantime, Fonzie will be looking after Heather. Before she leaves, Ashley gives Fonzie a list of notes like, leave Heather's bedroom window open no less than 6 inches and no more than 10 inches. Once they're alone, Fonzie throws away the list and goes to get ice cream with Heather.
What do you say we spoil dinner, get some ice cream?
Yeah.
Come on. We're off to ice cream.
Marion is leaving too. She's going to visit her mother, right as Joni and Chachi show up. Joni has Canadian flu, which wrecked the band's set.
Right in the middle of my big number, can you believe that? I mean, 1 minute the girls in the audience were fainting, right? Next minute, boom, she's fainting.
Marion decides not to see her mother and takes Joni upstairs to nurse her. Fonzie, Roger, and Flip have brought Heather over to stay at the Cunningham house while they go to see a boxing match. Sonny Liston versus Cassius Clay.
We got a big screen TV down in Arnold so we can watch that fight, man.
Flip's rooting for Liston, while Roger favors Clay, who is a boxer and a poet. Howard says that Heather shouldn't stay here with Joni's flu, and so Roger and Flip leave while Fonzie and Heather go back to the apartment. After dinner, Heather goes to get her dolls ready for a tea party, and Fonzie turns the television to the boxing match. As Heather tries to get Fonzie invested in the party, he's distracted by the match.
Fonzie?
Gives his
You
final
sit next to
instructions.
Jane
We can
and
see that there's
Betsy.
bad
Yeah.
blood between these two fighters.
Fonzie.
Yeah. Who are they?
And she sadly goes back to her room. The next day at the Cunningham house, Howard sends Chachi upstairs to get aspirin while he takes Joni's temperature. Joni's temperature is normal, and she admits she's not sick, but she is tired of touring.
I'm tired. I just need to rest, that's all.
Okay, you just stay here as long as you want.
When Chachi comes back down, he says how much he wants to get back on the road, much to Joni's annoyance. She particularly disliked their last concert for pig farmers at Moose Jaw, where her halter top fell off. Jenny and Casey enter.
Listen, I'm sorry about turning the house into a hospital zone. Oh, don't worry about it. I've been having a ball at Jenny's. We've been cramming for our finals.
Yeah, thrill a minute.
And when they start asking questions about show business, Joni goes upstairs. At Ashley's apartment, Heather doesn't want to change out of her pajamas, or eat breakfast, or clean up her mess in the living room. Eventually, she snaps at Fonzie that he's not her mother and can't tell her what to do.
You're not my mother and you can't tell me what to do.
I get it. I see. It's Tess, the old babysitter time, huh?
Heather then locks herself in her room. He manages to lure her out with a fake conversation with the man with a pony.
I think she'll want a pony. You told me the truth? Do you want the pony or not?
And he asks her why she's acting this way. She accuses him of being more interested in the fight than in the tea party. Fonzie admits that taking care of a little girl is like riding a bike. It involves a lot of falling off and getting back on. He and Heather have the tea party, for real this time.
1 lump or 2.
You cannot fool me. I know you did not pour it yet.
Later that day, Marion has helped Fonzie clean up Ashley's apartment. She assures him that raising children comes from experience.
See, first I raised Howard, and then I was ready for Rich and Joni.
Heather has put on a dress, and just in time to welcome back Ashley. The next day at the Cunningham house, Joni tells Chachi and her parents that she's quitting the band.
I'm quitting the band.
Thank you, Peter. That was Babysitting. It first aired back on March 1st, 1983. Happy Days was followed by a new Laverne and Shirley, in which Squiggy pays Carmine $100 to go out with his sister, Squendolyn.
I'd be honored to go out with you. What have you got in mind?
Another woman.
I'll make you forget.
ABC came in third place for the 8 o'clock hour this week, beaten by both CBS and NBC. CBS had an hour-long special called Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus, featuring highlights from the 113th edition of that famous show. The special was hosted by boxer Sugar Ray Leonard and his son, and it featured actor Paul Sorvino as P.T. Barnum.
Tuesday, it's all new, the spectacle, the thrills of Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus with host Sugar Ray Leonard and Son. It's the greatest show on earth.
Among the circus performers was famous animal trainer Gunther Gable Williams. The special also includes what is supposedly the first quadruple somersault ever. And NBC easily won the hour with a new episode of The A-Team, in which the team travels to Las Vegas to rescue a college professor who has perfected a gambling system. The episode is called The Rabbit Who Ate Las Vegas.
The cockroach that ate sense on Daddy.
So, Peter, of those three choices, what are you watching?
That episode of the A-Team sounds amazing, and it has one of the greatest titles I've ever heard, but I can't say no to Gunther Gable Williams and a quadruple somersault. So, yeah, circus it is.
I have to watch the Ringling Brothers special. For me, the main attraction would be seeing Paul Sorvino as P.T. Barnum.
I'm not talking about what you did inside. You did what you had to do. I'm talking about now. From now, here and now.
Babysitting was directed by Jerry Paris, and it was written by Paula A. Roth. The most recent of Paula's episodes that we reviewed was There's No Business Like No Business. She'll be with the show to the end. As for guest stars this week, there is nobody new. Are Aaron Moran and Scott Baio even guest stars at this point? They've been on the show this season way more than Potsy.
I'm going to say no. I think that if you have your own special thing in the opening credits, even if it's only just when you're on the show, then you don't count as like a special guest star. They are keeping you on for real.
I think they're in damage control mode here. By this point, it's obvious that Joni Loves Chachi is not going to survive the season, and they're, of course, paving the way for Scott and Aaron to return. As for songs this week, there are none.
That's bad.
But we do have some cultural and historical references.
That's good.
Fonzie says that he and Heather will have more fun than the Three Stooges going to the Vatican.
We're going to have so much fun. We're going to have more fun than the Three Stooges going to the Vatican.
By the early 1960s, when this story is taking place, the Stooges had stopped making short films for Columbia. Aww. But from 1959 to 1965, they did make a half dozen feature films, including Have Rocket Will Travel, The Three Stooges in Orbit, and The Outlaws Is Coming. None takes place at the Vatican, unfortunately. Not even the Three Stooges go around the world in a daze.
We are going on a trip around the world. In a boat? No. In a plane? No. In a daze.
Peter, they traveled around the world, but they didn't get anywhere near the Vatican.
I guess that the 1960s would have been too early for making fun of the Pope, even if I don't think any of the Stooges were Catholic, but come on.
The Stooges were famously Jewish, but you're right. In the 1960s, you couldn't have a movie where they're causing havoc in the Vatican, hitting each other with the crosses and knocking each other in the face with the Pope hats and things.
If you thought Catholics were anti-Semitic before, hoo boy.
It could have caused a war, Peter. So the Three Stooges avoided the Vatican to keep the peace. Fonzie says that Ashley's list of instructions is longer than the Constitution.
This is longer than the Constitution, and they ran a country on that.
Not even counting the amendments, the Constitution is 4,411 words long.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union.
And I realized this week that I had written movie reviews longer than the Constitution. So the boxing match in this episode is between challenger Muhammad Ali, then still known as Cassius Clay, and the heavyweight champion Sonny Liston.
Yes, that's why you're staying here with Mrs. C while we go and watch Clay whoop that bad. All right. Whoop him.
Clay and Liston fought twice. First in February 1964, and then again in May 1965. This is their first fight, considered one of the biggest sporting events of the 20th century. Clay, an 8-1 underdog, won in the 7th round when Liston threw in the towel. Just as the announcer tells us in this episode, the fight took place in Miami.
Well, it's a beautiful night here in Miami as Cassius Clay continues to bound around the ring.
Peter, if you had been around in February 1964 when this story is taking place, would you have watched the Clay-Liston fight?
Possibly, yes, but I'm not much of a sports person. I know some things about boxing, but that's mostly stuff I have absorbed through popular culture. I know who Muhammad Ali is. I know who Sonny Liston is. I don't know if I would have watched the fight at the time, because it's entirely likely that I would not have known that it would have been that important, because I don't know anything about boxing in general. If I had been alive at the time, I would have just seen it as, another boxing match. This does not really affect me in any way, and I would have ended up skipping it. And then years later, I would have been kicking myself and lying to my children. Oh yeah, I totally saw it.
I would have been the same way. Back in 1964, I wouldn't have had any interest in a boxing match at all. I wouldn't have known this was a big pivotal event in 20th century sports. Roger says that Cassius Clay is a great poet and compares him to Longfellow.
Not only is Cassius Clay a better boxer, but he's a great poet. Kind of like Longfellow.
Who do you fight?
Muhammad Ali was considered a master of trash talk, and his taunts aimed at other boxers were often phrased as rhymes. Later, Fonzie references Ali's most famous couplet, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, his hands can't hit what his eyes can't see.
Yes, all right. A little less floating, a little more stinging, all right?
But Ali did not say this until 1974 in advance of the Rumble in the Jungle against George Foreman.
I'm going to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. His hands can't hit what his eyes can't see.
I don't think that there is an American alive today who isn't familiar with float like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
What I didn't know was that he was doing this very early in his career. Back when he was still Cassius Clay, he was already delivering the little poems.
I understand that Jones liked to mix, but he must fall in six.
You must fall in six. Now, you mark that down, you mark that down.
It came many years later, but I would be remiss not to mention that Muhammad Ali released a children's album in which he fought the personification of tooth decay.
Who knocked the crack in the Liberty Bell?
Ali, Ali.
Who really gave that bell a smack?
Ali.
Meanwhile, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was an American poet of the 1800s. He's probably best known for Paul Revere's Ride and the Song of Hiawatha and other poems that kids have had to study in school. Do they even study Longfellow anymore?
Sadly, no.
Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere.
Fonzie says that he is Chef Boyardee.
The secret is out. I am Chef Boyardee.
There really was an Italian-American chef named Ettore Boiardi who became head chef at the Plaza Hotel in New York and then lent his name to a line of canned pasta.
Thank goodness for Chef Boyardee. Thank goodness for Chef Boyardee.
There was a real Chef Boyardee, but there was not a real Betty Crocker.
One of Heather's dolls is named Betsy, and Heather tells us that she wets.
Watch out for Betsy. Betsy wets.
Betsy Wetsy goes all the way back to the 1930s, but really became popular with baby boomers in the 1950s.
You can play Mommy right now with Ideal's Betsy Wetsy.
The doll was still manufactured until the 1980s. Supposedly, a Betsy Wetsy movie is in the works. Peter, what do you think a Betsy Wetsy movie could possibly be about?
Actually, I don't want to know. I don't think there's a way to make it not horrifying.
Joni's temperature is 98.6, which is normal.
Hey, 98.6, it's good to have you back again. Oh.
Normal human body temperature can range from 97 to 99 degrees, but Joni is correct. You do not have to have a fever to be sick.
You don't have to have a fever to be sick.
Mm-hmm. You don't have to be sick to come home either.
Most colds, for instance, do not come with a fever. And Peter, this week was kind of a milestone at work. They took out all the temperature kiosks that had been there since the pandemic.
That seems a bit premature to be doing.
Chachi says that Howard uses Grecian formula.
It was right between the cough syrup and your Grecian formula.
This is a line of men's hair coloring that has been marketed since 1961.
Grecian Formula 16. It's practically clear. As easy to use as water. No mess. Use it every day until you slowly, gradually get rid of just as much gray as you want.
And I would say that there is no way Tom Bosley or Howard Cunningham is using Grecian formula. What do you think?
Yeah, come on.
Howard says, betcha Vic Damone wouldn't talk to me like that.
I'll bet you Vic Damone wouldn't talk to me like that.
Vic Damone was a romantic crooner who was most popular in the 1950s and 60s. He's probably best known for his hit rendition of On the Street Where You Live from 1956.
I have often walked on this street before.
But he kept touring and recording until the early 2000s. Vic died in 2018. Somehow, I have a Vic Damone album in my possession. Have you heard much of Vic's music at all?
I have not. I can't say that his rendition of On the Street Where You Live is my favorite version of that song.
Joni says she and Chachi were performing for pig farmers in Moose Jaw.
I don't think playing for a camp full of pig farmers in Moose Jaw were exactly squealing.
Oh, jeez, Joni.
This is a real city of 33,000 people in Saskatchewan. It is not known for pig farming. It's actually an industrial center and railway junction, as well as home to a NATO flight training school. The city's unusual name has made it a punchline for decades. Had you ever heard of Moose Jaw?
I had heard of Moose Jaw. It's a fun name for a city, and that gets you very far if you're a city, you know, like Kalamazoo or Decatur. Well, I think Decatur's a fun name.
Fonzie says that Heather turned from Shirley Temple to Attila the Hun.
You turned from Shirley Temple to Attila the Hun.
Happy Days has referenced both of these fine people before. Shirley Temple was a major child star of the 1930s, known for playing cheerful, optimistic characters in films like Bright Eyes, Curly Top, and Heidi. After she grew out of being a child actress, she went on to a career as a diplomat. Today, I was thinking about that internet meme from a few years ago where people were haunted by the Shirley Temple TV commercial that would run incessantly on Cartoon Network. Are you familiar with that commercial?
I am not, sadly. Sadly? Question mark.
Presenting the Shirley Temple Little Darling DVD collection. 18 timeless films packed with hours of her unforgettable singing.
And the most crackers in my soup.
Monkeys and rabbits.
In the 5th century, Attila was the leader of a nomadic people called the Huns, who traveled from Central Asia into Eastern and Western Europe, conquering civilizations along the way. After Attila's death in 453, he became a prominent character in folklore, feared and respected for his prowess in battle and his lack of mercy toward his enemies. So the Attila the Hun of popular imagination is a combination of an actual historical figure and folklore.
He was never really someone I was super interested in, and I think a big part of the fact is, like you said, a lot of what we know about him is just stuff that people made up about him that just got passed down through history. We don't know a ton about Attila concretely.
Other observations, the studio audience is hot this week, at least at the beginning of the episode. Henry Winkler and Marion Ross both get nice welcomes. And Aaron Moran and Scott Baio get screams. When Ted McGinley and Billy Warlock show up, they not only get cheers, but at least one wolf whistle.
Ted McGinley, I think he deserved that.
I do too. In this episode, Chachi, even by Chachi's standards, is a colossal jackass this week. What did you think of Chachi's behavior in this one?
Throughout this episode, he doesn't really seem to care that his girlfriend, as far as he knows, is sick. He just wants to get back on the road. Chachi, for all you know, Canadian flu could be incredibly dangerous and fatal. And he also doesn't really seem to care that Joni is pretty obviously miserable. When she talks about the fact that the only reason they got a good audience reaction in Moose Jaw was because her halter top fell off, maybe you can show a little concern for her, Chachi?
This sets up next week's episode, in which he's even a bigger jerk for most of it.
Oh, goody.
We have another Fonzie malapropism this week. Tea and trumpets instead of tea and crumpets.
I cannot wait to have tea and trumpets with you. Yes, you look very pretty.
How would you rate that malaprop on a scale of 1 to 10?
3.
That's generous. That was a 2.5 for me. It was difficult for me to believe that Fonzie would be that oblivious to Heather during the tea party scene. Do you think that would be realistic, that somebody would be that distracted by a boxing match that they wouldn't pay attention to a child that was right in front of them?
What would you do if there was a child right in front of you?
Not for Fonzie at this point in time. A decent amount of time has passed over the course of this season, and Fonzie has repeatedly bonded with Heather. We've seen that he's very devoted to her, and she to him. So at this point in time, the idea that Fonzie would ignore this child trying to have a tea party with him so that he can listen to a boxing match, like a very important boxing match, but even so, it doesn't ring true to me.
I felt that the only reason he acted that way during the tea party scene was because the plot required him to.
Yeah, and it's not even that great of a plot. When I was watching this episode, I was wondering, was this supposed to air earlier in the season? But the fact that the B plot is about setting up Joni and Chachi returning to the show, spoiler alert, suggests that no, it isn't. This was where it was supposed to be. It just doesn't make any sense.
It's way too late in the season to have an episode where Fonzie has to win over Heather's trust. Just a few weeks ago, he was risking going AWOL from the military to be at her birthday party. Now he can't even look up during a tea party scene. That felt very contrived to me. Speaking of contrivances, why is Jenny Piccolo wearing a sexy nurse uniform if she didn't know Joni was sick? Was this just a coincidence? Is this just what she wears? What's going on in that scene?
Look, we have found out in other episodes that Jenny's family has maybe too many sexy outfits. Maybe she just felt like wearing something from her mother's closet that day.
And this was a very rare tag for Happy Days in that it's dramatic.
I mean, it's funny, it's serious, it's dramatic, and it tells a story that the world has been longing to hear.
And sets up a future episode. What did you think of that tag?
That was a rarity for Happy Days. It was a tag that wasn't just one last joke to squeeze in, to keep people watching for the commercials.
Stay tuned for more Happy Days.
I guess they were trying to get people to tune in next week. It's a strategy that obviously wasn't working. Are they trying to turn this into like Batman, where it's a cliffhanger at the end of every show? Tune in next week, same happy time, same happy channel. Well, no, it's not going to work for you. Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in Babysitting?
The absolute high point of the episode for me was Ashley's outfit that she's wearing when she's going to the tax seminar. She's wearing this very 60s black and yellow dress.
You know what it is. Black and yellow, black and yellow, black and yellow, black and yellow.
She's got a matching black pillbox hat. Then she puts on the gloves. It's all very Jackie Kennedy. It's fabulous.
If you had not mentioned Ashley's outfit, I might have quit the podcast right then and there. That was the highlight of this episode for me, and it's in the first few minutes. Peter, did you have any other observations you wanted to make about babysitting?
I think we covered everything. There's not really a lot to say about babysitting.
So, Peter, I will ask that age-old timeless question. was this episode any good?
It's rare that we get an episode of Happy Days that feels relevant to a larger plot, because that's not really what Happy Days is about. It's not really a big arc show, but this is an episode that is relevant to stuff that will happen in the future because of the Joni and Chachi episode, and it also feels weirdly regressive for Fonzie, considering it treats his relationship with Heather in a way that doesn't really ring true for this point in time. I wouldn't say you have to watch it. You can just read a summary of it or something, or just keep in mind that that's what happens.
To me, this was a very skippable episode. Very little of actual interest happens in it. They are setting up something for next week, but that entire scene is recreated next week. So you don't even need to watch it for that. The story with Fonzie and Heather is ill-timed in the season. He's already won over her trust many times over by this point. You know what this one reminded me of was that episode where Joni has to look after the house over the weekend, and then the hot water heater breaks down and she has it fixed. And I was like, what was the point of that episode? Do you remember the water heater episode?
I do. Only vaguely, but I remember it.
That episode felt like a letdown to me, because if the point is Joni is put in charge of the house and then all hell breaks loose, well, why didn't all hell break loose? And now if the point is Fonzie takes care of Heather and all hell breaks loose, again, all hell does not break loose. Nothing really happens that's all that bad. I didn't really see the point of this episode. It was just kind of a waste of time. But Linda Pearl's outfit is definitely not a waste of time, so definitely check that out. Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
We are still on Twitter. I guess it's not Twitter anymore, and it's actively getting worse, but we are there at Fonzie Podcast. I'm actually on Blue Sky now, petervolfranc.bsky.social.
I'm still on Twitter while it lasts. I'm at Joe_A_Blevins. You can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com, and you can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, Joni and Chachi return to Milwaukee for good in Turn Around and You're Home.
That could be a very emotional episode for all of us. So, see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
This here's the story of Cassius Clay, who changed his name to Muhammad Ali. He knows how to talk and he knows how to fight, and all the contenders were beat out of sight. Sing Muhammad, Muhammad Ali. He floats like a butterfly, stings like a bee. Muhammad, the black Superman, who calls to the other guy, I'm Ali. Catch me if you can.
18 timeless films packed with hours of her unforgettable singing.